At the PTA meeting, a woman stood up, straightened her blazer like she was about to deliver a TED talk, and said, "She can't represent our school. She's a nobody's kid. No father, no background." No one gasped. No one disagreed. The room didn't erupt. They just nodded. Slowly. Quietly. Like she'd said something uncomfortable, but necessary. I was sitting right there. Third row. I looked around, waiting for someone to speak up, to challenge her. But they didn't even look at me. They all stared ahead like she'd just read out the weather forecast. And my daughter? Sayela was sitting next to me, swinging her legs in that too big folding chair, gripping her sketchbook like it was the only solid thing in the room. She didn't look confused or hurt. She didn't say a word. She just kept her eyes on the cover of that book, the one she'd drawn stars all over. I wanted to speak. God, I wanted to say something. But the words caught in my throat. My face was hot, my chest was tight. I felt 12 years old again, like I was back in a classroom being laughed at for wearing the wrong shoes, like I didn't belong here, like she didn't either. The woman's name was Danica McCrae, PTA president, self-declared school image champion, mother of the kind of girl who wore pearls on picture day and corrected her teachers. Danica always spoke like she was smiling, even when she wasn't, especially when she wasn't. She kept talking. Something about representing our values and a family we can all be proud of. And I sat there, frozen, watching the people I'd smiled at in carpool line and bake sales silently push my daughter out of the picture. Sayela didn't ask what it meant. She didn't tug on my arm or whisper questions. She just sat there, quiet still, except for the gentle tapping of her shoe against the chair leg. She was only 7, but she understood more than they thought. I wanted to wrap her in my arms and carry her out of that room. I wanted to scream at every single person in that gym, but instead, I sat there. Because that's what you learn to do when you've been alone too long. You learn to survive in silence. The rest of the meeting went on. They talked about field trips and fundraising and which family would be hosting the spring gala. I didn't hear most of it. I kept looking down at Sayela's hands, tracing the edge of a drawing she'd tucked inside the cover of her sketchbook. It was a picture of a tree growing out of cracked concrete. Its roots split the pavement wide open. And then, just as they were wrapping up the meeting, the doors at the back of the gym opened. They didn't slam. There was no drama, just a shift in air, a presence that pulled every eye to the back of the room. A tall woman walked in, sharp suit, braided hair, confidence like a storm cloud. She didn't smile. She looked directly across the room and said clear and loud, "I came back just to meet her." She pointed straight at Sayela, and for the first time that evening, the room went completely, truly silent. Most people in our town don't really see you unless you have a last name that means something, a big house, or a husband who plays golf with someone on the school board. I have none of that. My name is Jenna Ray. I work 2 part-time jobs, I rent a small duplex near the highway, and my daughter Sayla is the reason I get out of bed every morning. She's 7 years old. She has this quiet way of moving through the world, like she's observing it all from behind glass. Big brown eyes, curly hair that does whatever it wants, and a little dimple that only shows when she's concentrating. Not smiling, concentrating, like when she draws. She carries a sketchbook everywhere. Grocery store, doctor's office, church. If she's not talking, she's drawing. If she's drawing, she's calm. That's her language. She was born on a rainy Tuesday night in early spring. I remember the way the nurse looked at me when I handed her the birth certificate form with just one parent name. She didn't say anything, but the pause told me everything. People always pause when you don't give them the answer they expect. Sayela never met her father. He walked out before she was born. No calls, no letters, just disappeared. And I made a choice not to chase after someone who didn't want to be found. We've been a team of 2 ever since. When Sayela started school, I didn't expect her to stand out. I expected her to struggle. I expected comments about attention span or quietness or how she didn't like to play with other kids at recess. What I didn't expect was for her teacher to pull me aside and say, "Jenna, your daughter is one of the most observant children I've ever met. Do you know she notices birds most adults miss? And her drawings, they have emotion. That's rare in kids her age." I didn't say much then. I just smiled and nodded. That night I cried alone in the bathroom, not because I was sad, because someone saw her. Sayela doesn't have friends the way most kids do. She sits by herself at lunch. She draws on the margins of worksheets. She answers questions in class only when she's sure she won't be wrong. She doesn't like birthday parties or noisy classrooms. But give her a pencil and paper and she can build entire worlds. That's why when Ms. Braxton, her second grade teacher, told me she wanted to nominate Sayla for the statewide Future Voices showcase, I didn't know what to say. It's this big event where schools across the state send one student to share something creative, writing, artwork, ideas about how they see the world. The goal is to recognize kids with unique perspectives, kids with something to say. She sees beauty in things most people ignore, Ms. Braxton told me. The way she drew the playground cracks and turned them into rivers. That's not just talent, that's voice. I didn't want to get my hopes up. We're not the kind of family people nominate for things. I've been in enough parent meetings and volunteer groups to know how this goes. Sayela's name would come up and someone would smile politely and say, "She's sweet, but..." And then we'd be forgotten again. But this time, Ms. Braxton insisted. She said it was Sayela's turn to be seen, so we showed up to that PTA meeting. I dressed Sayela in her favorite blue dress, the one with little sunflowers printed along the hem. She had her sketchbook in one hand and a crayon tucked behind her ear. I told her we might have to sit through some boring stuff before they made any decisions, and she nodded like a soldier heading into battle. I didn't think anything dramatic would happen. I didn't think people would be cruel. I thought maybe they'd politely dismiss her nomination, talk around her name, move on to a child who checked all the boxes. I didn't expect Danica to stand up and tear her down in front of everyone, and I didn't expect Sayela to just take it. Not cry, not run, not even flinch. She sat there, one foot still swinging, the edge of her drawing sticking out from under the cover like a flag of quiet resistance. She looked so small in that chair, and yet somehow bigger than the people trying to shrink her. That moment didn't just hurt. It made me see something I hadn't seen before. Sayela wasn't the one being tested. I was. The whole room was. And as it turned out, someone outside that room was watching too. The Monday after the PTA meeting, I didn't want to send Sayela to school. I almost called in sick to both my jobs, just to keep her home. But she came into the kitchen that morning already dressed, wearing her purple sneakers and holding her sketchbook like always. She didn't say a word about the meeting. She just said, "Can I have toast with honey?" I made her toast. I braided her hair. And I pretended like everything was normal, because that's what moms do when the world turns sharp around their children. We keep the edges away for as long as we can. But inside, I was boiling. At work, I kept replaying it in my head, the way Danica said it like it was just a fact, the way the room nodded, the way no one said, "That's not right," or "She's just a child," or even, "Let's move on." They agreed with her, or they were too afraid to say they didn't. I wasn't surprised, but I was still angry. That night, I texted Ms. Braxton to thank her for nominating Sayela and let her know we understood if they wanted to choose someone else. I told her, "We don't want to make trouble." She replied with just 3 words. She earned this. 2 days later, a group email went out to all the parents. It said the school had decided to pause the student ambassador nomination to reevaluate criteria and maintain alignment with community values. Community values. That was their way of saying, not your daughter. When I picked up Sayela from school that day, she climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in without a word. I watched her through the rearview mirror. She wasn't drawing, she wasn't humming, just staring at the seat in front of her. I asked her how her day was. She said, "It was fine." Her voice was too quiet, her face too still. We sat at a red light, and I looked back at her again. "Did something happen?" She shrugged. "Not really." Not really from Sayela usually means yes. When we got home, I gave her a snack and sat beside her on the living room rug. She was drawing again, a row of houses, all with curtains closed. In the corner of the page, there was a little girl on the sidewalk holding a paper in her hand. No one had opened the door. I asked, "What's she holding?" Sayela didn't look up. She said, "An invitation." "But it doesn't work." I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell her none of this was her fault, that people could be wrong even when they speak with authority. But instead, I said, "Can I draw with you?" She slid me a piece of paper and a crayon. That night, after I put her to bed, I sat in the kitchen and stared at the school's email. Then, I opened a blank document. I didn't plan what to write. I just let it spill out. I wrote about what it feels like to be overlooked, what it means when people define your child by what they don't have. I wrote, "My daughter may not come from a traditional family. She doesn't wear name brands or have a dad to take her to donuts with dads. But she is observant and kind and sees the world in ways most adults have forgotten. If that's not enough to represent your school, maybe the school should ask itself what it really stands for." I posted it anonymously in a local parents' Facebook group. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I just needed to say it somewhere. To anyone. The next morning, I woke up to 43 comments. By noon, the post had been shared over 200 times. People I didn't know started commenting, "I know who wrote this," and "I have a child like this too," and "This broke my heart." Ms. Braxton called me later that day. Her voice was firm, but there was a warmth behind it. She said, "You should know someone important read what you wrote. Someone who used to sit in those same school chairs." I asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Just bring Sayela on Friday. Someone special is coming." I didn't understand what she meant, but the way she said it made something settle in my chest. Like maybe, for once, the story wasn't about to end with a polite rejection. It was just getting ready to turn. By Thursday night, Sayla had stopped asking about the nomination. She hadn't mentioned her drawings. She hadn't even opened her sketchbook in 2 days. That alone scared me more than anything anyone had said at that meeting. I kept her routine the same: dinner at 6, bath by 7, story by 8. But something in her had pulled back. Not angry, not sad, just distant, like a little light that had gone dim. After I tucked her in, I sat on the edge of her bed and asked, "You know you didn't do anything wrong, right?" She nodded once but didn't speak. I asked, "Do you want to talk about anything?" She looked up at me with those wide, tired eyes and said, "Mom, if I'm not enough, is that your fault or mine?" I sat there for a few seconds too long. I didn't know how to answer her. I wanted to tell her she was more than enough, that the people who made her feel small weren't worth listening to, but she was 7. She didn't need speeches. She needed to believe me. I leaned down, kissed her forehead, and said, "You are exactly who you are supposed to be, and that's the best thing in the world." Then I went into the hallway and cried where she couldn't hear me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept rereading the post I had written. The comments kept pouring in. Some people said it made them think about how they judged others. Some said it reminded them of their own childhood, and one comment stood out. It was from someone named A. Voss. Just 2 words. "She matters." I didn't recognize the name at first. I just assumed it was another supportive parent. But the next morning, Ms. Braxton pulled me aside at drop-off and said, "You're still coming tomorrow, right?" I hesitated. I don't want to make it awkward for Sayla. Her voice was calm but serious. "You're going to want to be there." I asked what was going on. She smiled just a little. "Someone reached out after seeing your post. A former student. She's kind of a big deal." I waited. "She's flying in." "Flying in for what?" "For your daughter." I didn't say anything at first. I tried to make sense of it. Who would fly in to meet Sayla? What kind of former student would even care? Then Miss Braxton handed me a printed article. It was about a woman named Aurelia Voss, a nationally recognized artist, tech designer, and entrepreneur, raised in this same town, graduated from this same elementary school, now based in New York. Her work had been featured in museums, magazines, even on school curriculums. I looked up from the article, stunned. "Why would she care about Sayla?" Ms. Braxton said, "Because she was Sayla, and she told me your daughter reminded her of herself." That night, I told Sayla we were going to the school again the next day. She didn't look excited. I said, "Someone wants to meet you." She said, "Do I have to talk a lot?" I smiled. "Just bring your sketchbook." We got to school early the next morning. Sayla wore the same sunflower dress from the PTA meeting. I had offered other options, but she picked it again. She said, "It's the one I was wearing when they didn't pick me. If something different happens, I want it to be in the same dress." We waited near the art room. Other parents and students walked by. Some gave polite nods. Some looked away. Sayela sat beside me, feet not touching the floor, flipping through her drawings with a quiet focus. I kept checking the clock, not sure what we were even waiting for. The minutes stretched. The hum of voices and classroom doors echoed down the hallway. Then I heard someone say, "That's her." I turned. A tall woman walked toward us, wearing a gray jacket over black jeans and sneakers. Her hair was pulled back, her presence quiet but unmistakable. She knelt down in front of Sayela and smiled. "You're the one who drew the tree growing from the sidewalk crack, right?" Sayela nodded slowly. "I flew in this morning because of that drawing," she said. "Because when I was your age, I drew something just like it. I want to see the rest of your sketches, and if you're okay with it, I'd like to work with you." Sayela looked at me, uncertain, then looked back at her. "You want to work with me?" "Yes, because you see things most people miss. That's a gift, and I came back to tell you it matters." Sayela didn't smile right away, but her fingers relaxed around her sketchbook. Then, for the first time all week, she opened it without hesitation. The school gym was already half full when we arrived. Parents gathered in small clusters, holding coffee cups and whispering in polite tones. Kids lined up along the edge of the stage, most of them in carefully ironed clothes, hair brushed until it gleamed. Sayela held my hand with one of hers and her sketchbook with the other. We didn't have a reserved seat, so we stood in the back. Ms. Braxton caught my eye from across the room and gave a small nod. Sayela stood on tiptoe to peek past the rows of folding chairs. Danica McCrae was front and center, seated next to the principal, her posture perfect, her smile thin and controlled. Her daughter, Carolyn, stood beside her with a printed folder in her arms. Her dress looked expensive, crisp, untouched by the kind of day-to-day wear Sayela's sunflower dress had seen. The microphone crackled as the principal stepped onto the stage. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Today we are recognizing the student who will represent Oak Ridge Elementary at the state's Future Voices Showcase." Applause rolled through the room. He continued, "We want this student to embody the creativity, character, and potential our school believes in. This year, the selection committee has reviewed nominations, considered faculty recommendations, and looked closely at student work. And we are proud to announce—" Danica straightened. Caroline smoothed her folder. "Caroline McCrae." The applause was instant and loud. Several parents stood to clap. Danica flashed her brightest smile as Caroline walked up to the stage, confidence radiating from her polished shoes to her neatly tied hair. Sayela's grip on my hand tightened. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just watched. The principal handed Caroline the certificate. She stepped up to the mic and began reading from her folder about her community garden project and how much she loved volunteering. It was a well-practiced speech. She spoke clearly, hit all the buzzwords, and thanked the school for believing in her. Behind me, I heard someone enter through the side door. I turned. Aurelia Voss walked into the gym with purpose. Not rushed, not loud, just direct like a question that demands an answer. She was wearing the same gray jacket from the day before. She had no entourage, no clipboard, just a quiet, undeniable presence. The room shifted the moment they saw her. People began whispering. Phones came out. Danica turned in her seat, her smile faltering. The principal cleared his throat. "It appears we have a special guest today, former Oak Ridge student, now nationally recognized artist and entrepreneur. Ms. Aurelia Voss." Scattered claps followed. Aurelia stepped forward, her gaze moving across the crowd until it landed on Sayela. She didn't look at the principal. She didn't nod at Danica. She said loud and clear, "Before you finish, I'd like to say something." The room fell quiet. She walked to the center of the gym and turned to face the audience. "This week, I saw a drawing of a tree breaking through a sidewalk crack. It wasn't pretty in the traditional sense. It was raw. It was real. It was done by a child who, like I once was, has been overlooked because of what she isn't instead of who she is." Murmurs moved through the room. She raised her hand to quiet them. "I came back to this school for one reason, to meet her, to tell her that her work matters, that her perspective is powerful, that creativity doesn't require permission from pedigree." She turned, pointed across the gym, to Sayela Ray. Every head turned. Sayela froze beside me, her eyes wide. Aurelia continued, "I'd like to offer Sayela a full scholarship to my youth mentorship program. I will personally work with her over the next year to develop her art, her confidence, and her voice, because she already has something no committee can give her." Vision. I felt a wave rise in my chest. I looked at Sayela, whose mouth hung slightly open. She whispered, "Is she talking about me?" I nodded, barely holding back tears. Aurelia stepped toward her and crouched down to her level. "You don't have to speak right now. Just keep drawing. The world will catch up." Sayela didn't say a word. She opened her sketchbook and carefully pulled out the drawing of the tree. She held it up. Aurelia took it like it was a rare treasure, and in that moment, no one remembered who had won the certificate, because the entire gym knew who the real voice of the future was. After that day in the gym, nothing was quite the same. People started looking at Sayela differently. Teachers stopped her in the hallway to ask about her drawings. Classmates who had never spoken to her began asking to sit near her. A few even tried drawing with her during free time. She didn't suddenly become popular, and she didn't want to, but she was no longer invisible. At home, she started drawing more than ever. I'd find little sketches on the kitchen table, the bathroom mirror, inside her backpack, tiny paper scraps that carried entire stories. Some were happy, some were sad. All of them were honest. She didn't talk much about what had happened in the gym. She didn't have to. She knew, and she knew I knew. That was enough. Aurelia kept her promise. Every Saturday morning, Sayela would sit at the dining table with her headphones on, speaking to Aurelia over video. They talked about texture, color, perspective, but they also talked about fear, rejection, and finding your place in a world that doesn't always leave space for people like you. One Saturday, I heard Sayela say, "Sometimes when people look at me, and I think they see the quiet before they see me." Aurelia answered, "That's okay. Some people miss the sunrise too, but it still rises." There were moments when I questioned whether all of this was real, whether a girl like mine, raised by one parent without the right connections or last name, was really being seen for who she was. But then I would see her standing a little taller, holding her pencil with more purpose, laughing at something quietly to herself while drawing. And I knew it was real, and it was just the beginning. The following spring, Sayela's work was chosen to be part of a national children's art exhibition. One of her drawings, a girl growing wings from her backpack, was displayed in a gallery in New York. I couldn't afford to fly us out there, but Aurelia made it happen. She called me one evening and said, "You need to be there when she sees it on the wall." The day we walked into that gallery, Sayela didn't speak. She just walked slowly through the rows of framed artwork until she reached her piece. It was there, framed, literature named. Beneath it, a little placard read, "Sayela Ray, age 7, Oak Ridge Elementary, Georgia." She looked up at me and said, "It doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like it belongs to everyone." And she was right. It did. Back home, Danica McCrae stepped down from her position on the PTA. No announcement, no apology, just a quiet exit. Some people said the pressure had gotten to her. Others said she didn't like being questioned. I didn't care why she left. I cared that the silence she created was finally broken. At the next PTA meeting, I stood up. Not because I wanted revenge or recognition, but because I finally had something to say. I looked around the room and said, "If a child has to come from a perfect home to be seen, we're teaching the wrong lesson. We don't get to decide who deserves to be visible. That's not education. That's exclusion." No one interrupted. No one clapped either. But they listened. That was enough. I walked back to my seat, and when I sat down, Ms. Braxton reached over and touched my arm. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Sayela is 8 now. She still keeps her sketchbook close. She still speaks softly, but the light in her has grown stronger. She doesn't draw trees breaking through sidewalks anymore. Now she draws entire forests growing on rooftops. Sometimes, when I watch her, I think back to that night when she asked me if not being enough was my fault or hers. She never asked that again. She didn't need to, because now she knows. She always was enough. The world just needed to catch up. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If this touched something in you, if you've ever felt unseen, or if you've raised a child who the world tried to overlook, then you know this wasn't just about a PTA meeting. This was about voice, about worth, about standing up, even when your voice shakes. And if you saw a bit of yourself or someone you love in Sayela's story, then please Like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and leave a comment below. I read every one of them, and your words matter here. And if you want to hear more real stories like this, stories that challenge, heal, and remind us what we're capable of, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss a moment. This world needs more voices like Sayla's. Thanks for being here.